There is a place on Earth that has been visited by fewer humans than the surface of the moon. It's not on another continent. It's not at the poles. It's not on some remote island that requires months of travel to reach. It's here, right now. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, just a few hundred kilometers from the island of Guam, lies a gash in the planet so deep, so dark, so utterly hostile to life that for decades we believed nothing could survive there. We were wrong. In 1960, two men climbed into a steel sphere called the Trieste and descended into the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in Earth's oceans. They dropped for 5 hours through absolute darkness, the pressure increasing with every meter, until they reached the bottom at 10,916 meters below the surface. That's deeper than Mount Everest is tall. If you placed Everest at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, its peak would still be underwater by more than 2 kilometers to height, of 6 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other.
At the bottom, the pressure was 1,086 atmospheres.
That's the weight of 8,000 pounds pressing down on every square inch. The equivalent of 3 SUVs balanced on your thumbnail. The temperature was just above freezing. No sunlight had reached this place in hundreds of millions of years. This was the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the Greek underworld, the realm of the dead. The two men peered out through their tiny reinforced window into the abyss, expecting to see nothing. Emptiness, a dead world. And then something moved, a flatfish, swimming, living, existing in a place where life should be impossible, where the pressure should crush cells, where the cold should freeze metabolism, where the absence of light should mean the absence of energy, and therefore the absence of everything. But there it was, alive, and that fish was not alone. You are a drop of water drifting on the surface of the Pacific Ocean. The sun warms you. You're part of the thin skin of water that interfaces with the atmosphere, where light penetrates and photosynthesis happens, and life explodes in a riot of color and activity. Plankton drift around you, fish dart below. Above, seabirds wheel and call. This is the epipelagic zone, the sunlight zone. The world you know, but you're sinking, slowly at first. Caught in a downwelling current, you begin to descend into the depths. The light starts to fade. The temperature drops. Within minutes, you've left the warm surface layer and entered the twilight zone, the mesopelagic. Here, at 200 meters down, the length of 2 football fields, the light is dim and blue. The pressure has increased to 20 atmospheres. That's the pressure inside a fire extinguisher. It's enough to crush an unprotected human chest, to collapse your lungs, to force nitrogen into your bloodstream where it doesn't belong. But you keep sinking. By 400 meters, the light is almost gone. Just a faint blue glow filtering down from above. The pressure is now 40 atmospheres. By 600 meters, it's 60 atmospheres. The temperature has dropped to just a few degrees above freezing. At 1,000 meters, the height of 3 Eiffel Towers, you cross into the midnight zone, the epipelagic zone. Here there is no light from above, none. The sun might as well not exist. The only illumination comes from bioluminescence, the eerie glow of creatures that make their own light through chemical reactions. The pressure is 100 atmospheres. The weight of a fully loaded semi-truck pressing down on an area the size of a postage stamp. Still you descend. At 2,000 meters, the pressure is 200 atmospheres. At 3,000 meters, 300 atmospheres. The cold is absolute, just above freezing, the water held liquid only by the immense pressure. You've been sinking for hours now, and you're entering a realm few humans have ever seen. The abyssopelagic. The abyss. The seafloor here is covered in a fine sediment called ooze, the accumulated remains of billions upon billions of dead plankton that have rained down from the surface over millions of years. The ooze is soft, almost fluffy. Despite the pressure, it's kilometers deep in places. When something dies in the surface waters and sinks, this is where it ends up. The abyss is a graveyard. But you're not stopping here. The ocean floor beneath you suddenly drops away. You've reached the edge of a trench. The ground plunges downward at an impossible angle, disappearing into darkness so complete it seems to swallow light itself. You're entering the Hadal Zone, the deepest parts of the deepest ocean, the last frontier on Earth. There are only a handful of places on Earth where the Hadal Zone exists. Ocean trenches, massive underwater canyons formed where one tectonic plate slides beneath another in a process called subduction. The Pacific Plate diving under the Philippine Plate, the Nazca Plate sliding beneath South America, the Australian Plate plunging under the Sunda Plate. These are zones of violent geological activity. Earthquakes that can level cities, tsunamis that can cross oceans, volcanoes that can alter global climate. And at the point where the plates meet, the ocean floor bends and breaks, creating trenches that plunge kilometers below the surrounding seafloor. The Mariana Trench is the deepest, but it's not alone. The Tonga Trench in the South Pacific reaches 10,882 meters. The Philippine Trench, 10,540 meters. The Kermadec Trench, 10,047 meters. There are more than 30 trenches worldwide that exceed 6,000 meters in depth. The official beginning of the Hadal Zone. Together, these trenches represent less than 2% of the ocean floor. They're rare, isolated, scattered across the Pacific and Indian Oceans like wounds in the planet's skin. And they're tiny. Most are only a few kilometers wide, though they can stretch for hundreds or even thousands of kilometers in length. To understand how extreme these environments are, consider this. If you could remove all the water from the ocean, the trenches would be the deepest canyons on Earth. The Mariana Trench would be a gash in the planet deeper than the Grand Canyon by a factor of 6. Its walls would be nearly vertical in places. Standing at the rim and looking down, you wouldn't be able to see the bottom. It would be hidden in darkness and haze, kilometers below. These are not gentle slopes. These are geological scars, cracks in the crust, places where the planet's surface is literally being torn apart and recycled into the mantle. And somehow, improbably, impossibly, these trenches are full of life. You are sinking through the Hadal Zone now, and the pressure is becoming difficult to comprehend. At 6,000 meters, the pressure is 600 atmospheres. That's 8,000 pounds per square inch. Your body, if you were foolish enough to be here unprotected, would be crushed instantly. Not slowly, instantly. Your rib cage would collapse, your lungs would be compressed to the size of pebbles. The air spaces in your sinuses and ears would implode. The gases dissolved in your blood would be forced into solution at such high concentrations that your blood would become toxic. But you keep sinking. At 7,000 meters, 700 atmospheres. At 8,000 meters, 800 atmospheres. The pressure is now so great that it affects chemistry itself. Proteins fold differently. Cell membranes behave strangely. The very structure of molecules is warped by the force pressing in from all sides. At 9,000 meters, 900 atmospheres. You've been descending for nearly 8 hours now. The walls of the trench rise on either side of you, invisible in the darkness but present, massive, oppressive. You can feel them somehow, the way you can feel the presence of mountains when hiking at night. At 10,000 meters, 1,000 atmospheres. The pressure is 15,000 pounds per square inch. This is Challenger Deep, the lowest point in the Mariana Trench, the lowest point in any ocean, the lowest point on Earth. The temperature is 1 to 4 degrees Celsius, just above freezing. Cold enough to numb, cold enough to kill, but not cold enough to freeze, because the pressure won't allow it. Water has strange properties under these conditions. It's denser than normal water, more viscous. It flows differently. There is no light, not a photon, not a glimmer. The darkness here is absolute in a way that darkness never is on land. On land, there's always something: starlight, moonlight, the faint glow of bioluminescent organisms, the distant lights of civilization. Here, there is nothing. The darkness is a physical presence. It presses against you, fills your lungs, seeps into your bones. And yet, there is life here. The first creatures you encounter are amphipods, tiny shrimp-like crustaceans, translucent and ghostly, drifting through the water like snowflakes. They're everywhere once you know to look for them. Thousands of them, maybe millions. They're small. Most are only a few centimeters long, but they're alive, thriving even. Amphipods are scavengers. When something dies in the surface waters, a whale, a large fish, a squid, its body sinks. Most of it is consumed as it falls, picked apart by creatures at every level. But some always makes it to the bottom. And when it does, the amphipods are waiting. They can smell death from kilometers away. Their antennae are extraordinarily sensitive, capable of detecting a few molecules of decomposition products in billions of liters of water. When a carcass lands on the seafloor, amphipods converge on it like a swarm. Within hours, hundreds of thousands of them will be feeding, stripping flesh from bone with their mandibles, converting death into life. But amphipods are just the beginning. There are fish here. Snailfish mostly, pale, gelatinous creatures that look more like tadpoles than fish. They have no scales. Their skin is translucent. You can see their bones and organs through their flesh. Their eyes are small and weak. Vision is useless here, so evolution has reduced it to almost nothing. Instead, they navigate by sensing vibrations in the water, detecting the movements of prey and predators through specialized organs along their lateral lines. Snailfish are the deepest living fish ever discovered. In 2017, scientists filmed a snailfish at 8,128 meters in the Mariana Trench. In 2021, they found another at 8,336 meters in the Izu Ogasawara Trench near Japan. These are not records that will stand forever. We keep finding fish deeper and deeper, but there's a limit. Physics says so. At a certain depth, the pressure becomes too great for fish to exist. Their cells can't maintain the right concentrations of chemicals. The proteins that make up their bodies stop working. The current estimate is that fish cannot survive deeper than about 8,400 meters, 840 atmospheres. Below that, you need a different body plan, different biochemistry, different solutions to the problem of existence. But there is life below 8,400 meters. Lots of it. You are an amphipod now, drifting in the darkness of Challenger Deep. You were born here. Your parents were born here. Your species has lived in this trench for millions of years, evolving in isolation, adapting to pressures that would kill almost any other creature on Earth. Your body is filled with a substance called piezolites, organic molecules that help your cells maintain their structure under extreme pressure. These molecules act like molecular scaffolding, supporting your proteins and membranes, preventing them from collapsing under the weight of the ocean above you. Your cell membranes are different from those of surface creatures. They're made with special lipids that remain flexible at high pressure. Normal cell membranes would become rigid down here, like butter in a refrigerator, but yours stay fluid and functional. Your metabolism runs slowly. There's not much food in the Hadal Zone, only what falls from above, so you've evolved to conserve energy. You can go weeks without eating. Your heart beats slowly. Your movements are deliberate, efficient. You waste nothing, but you're alive. Conscious in your way, you can sense the water around you, feel the currents, detect the chemical traces of food. You're hungry. You're always hungry. And then you smell it. Death. Somewhere above you, drifting down through the water column, is food. Something has died in the surface waters, and its body is sinking. You can't see it. You don't have eyes. Not really. Just light-sensitive patches that can barely distinguish between dark and slightly less dark. But you don't need to see it. You can follow the scent. You begin to swim upward, against the current, toward the source of the smell. Around you, thousands of other amphipods are doing the same thing. You're part of a migration, a mass movement toward food. It's been weeks since the last carcass fell into the trench. Everyone is hungry. The current fights you. The water is viscous, thick with pressure, and it takes effort to move through it. Your legs work in rhythm, propelling you upward, meter by meter. The smell gets stronger. You're getting close, and then you see it. Not with vision, you can barely see, but with your other senses. A disturbance in the water, a massive shape, sinking slowly, trailing a cloud of scent. It's a whale, a sperm whale, dead for days, its body bloated with gases produced by decomposition. It's the size of a bus, tons of food, enough to feed every amphipod in this trench for weeks. The whale settles onto the seafloor with a soft thud, though thud is the wrong word because sound travels differently down here. Everything is muffled, dampened. The water is so dense that sound waves move faster but feel slower. A deep bass rumble that you feel in your body more than you hear. You and 10,000 of your closest relatives descend upon the carcass and begin to feed. This is how life survives in the Hadal Zone. By waiting, by scavenging, by taking advantage of every scrap of energy that falls from the surface. But there's another source of energy down here, one that doesn't depend on the sun at all. You are drifting away from the whale carcass now, full and sluggish, when you sense something else. Eat. A plume of warm water rising from the sea floor. It's not much, just a few degrees warmer than the surrounding water, but in a place where the temperature is always near freezing, a few degrees is a beacon. You follow the warmth, and you find a hydrothermal vent. These vents are cracks in the seafloor where seawater seeps down into the crust, gets heated by magma chambers below, and then shoots back up into the ocean, superheated and loaded with chemicals. The water coming out of some vents is over 400 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead, but it doesn't boil because the pressure is so high that water's boiling point is elevated. The water stays liquid, even at temperatures that would vaporize it at the surface. The vents are surrounded by life. Not as much life as in a coral reef or a kelp forest, but more life than you'd expect to find in the deepest, darkest, coldest part of the ocean. Tube worms cluster around the vents, their red plumes waving in the current. Mussels cover the rocks, crabs scuttle across the seafloor, shrimp swarm in the warm water, so many of them they look like a blizzard. This life doesn't depend on the sun. It depends on chemosynthesis. The water coming out of the vents is loaded with chemicals: hydrogen sulfide, methane, iron, manganese. These chemicals are toxic to most life, but to the bacteria living around the vents, they're food. The bacteria use the energy from oxidizing these chemicals to build organic molecules from carbon dioxide, the same way plants use sunlight to build organic molecules through photosynthesis. And everything else here depends on those bacteria. The tube worms have no mouths, no digestive systems. Instead, their bodies are full of bacteria that convert vent chemicals into food. The worms provide the bacteria with a place to live. The bacteria provide the worms with energy. It's a symbiosis, a partnership, a way of life that evolved in the deep ocean billions of years ago and continues today in the darkest trenches. Hydrothermal vents are not common in the Hadal Zone. They're more common on mid-ocean ridges, at shallower depths. But they exist. And where they exist, They create oases of life in a desert of darkness. But most of the Hadal Zone is not near hydrothermal vents. Most of it is just empty. You are a snailfish now, the deepest living fish species ever discovered. You're hovering above the seafloor at 8,200 meters in the Mariana Trench. Your body almost neutrally buoyant. Your fins making tiny adjustments to keep you in place. You're hunting, or more accurately, you're waiting for something small to move. An amphipod, a copod, anything. You'll eat it. Your body is exquisitely adapted to this environment. You have no swim bladder, the gas-filled organ that most fish use to control their buoyancy. A swim bladder would be crushed instantly at this depth. Instead, your body is full of water and gel-like substances that are incompressible. You're essentially the same density as the water around you, so you don't sink and you don't float. You just exist, suspended in the darkness. Your bones are soft and flexible. In fact, they're barely bones at all, more like cartilage, the soft tissue that makes up your nose and ears. Hard bones would be a liability down here. They'd crack under the pressure. But soft, flexible bones can bend and compress without breaking. Your body is full of a compound called trimethylamine N-oxide, or TMAO. This is your secret weapon. TMAO is a small organic molecule that counteracts the effects of pressure on your proteins. Without it, the pressure would distort your proteins, changing their shape, making them non-functional. TMAO essentially wraps around your proteins like a protective blanket, keeping them stable even under crushing pressure. The deeper you live, the more TMAO you need. Your tissues are saturated with it. You detect movement, something small, drifting just above the seafloor. You can't see it clearly. Your eyes are weak, but you can sense it through the vibrations it creates in the water. It's an amphipod, probably. You move toward it, slowly, carefully. You don't want to create a current that will scare it away. Closer, closer. The amphipod doesn't sense you. You're too slow, too quiet. And then, in a sudden burst of speed that seems impossible given the density of the water and the pressure surrounding you, you strike. Your mouth opens wide, creating a vacuum, and you inhale the amphipod. It struggles for a moment in your mouth, but you swallow it whole. It slides down your throat, into your stomach, where it will be slowly digested over the next several days. One amphipod, probably 5 calories worth of energy. But in the Hadal Zone, 5 calories is a feast. This is your life. Hovering in darkness, hunting tiny prey, conserving every joule of energy. Existing at the edge of what's physically possible for a vertebrate, you are a marvel of evolution. A creature so specialized for this extreme environment that you could not survive anywhere else. If you were brought to the surface, the reduction in pressure would cause the TMAO in your tissues to tear your cells apart. Your proteins would unfold. Your body would essentially dissolve from the inside. You are trapped here. This trench is your home, your prison, your kingdom. And you would have it no other way, because this is where you evolved, where your ancestors have lived for millions of years, where you are perfectly, exquisitely adapted to survive. Let's talk about what else lives down here, what science has found, what we've only glimpsed. In 2020, scientists explored the Mariana Trench with advanced underwater cameras and found creatures that shouldn't exist. A species of amphipod they named Hirondelia gigas, the giant amphipod. It's 10 centimeters long, which doesn't sound large until you realize that most deep-sea amphipods are only 1 or 2 centimeters. This is a monster, a predator, not just a scavenger. It hunts other amphipods, attacks them with specialized claws, consumes them in the darkness. They found sea cucumbers, bizarre slug-like echinoderms that crawl across the seafloor on hundreds of tiny tube feet, filtering sediment through their bodies, extracting the tiny bits of organic matter that make it this deep. Sea cucumbers are everywhere in the Hadal Zone. They're the vacuum cleaners of the deep, processing ooze, recycling nutrients. They found xenophytophores, single-celled organisms that grow to enormous sizes. Some are 10 centimeters across, the size of your hand. One cell. It's hard to even comprehend. These creatures are technically protists, not animals, but they're complex beyond imagining. They build elaborate shells from sediment particles, gluing them together with organic cement. They extend thin pseudopods, temporary arms of cytoplasm, that stretch out across the seafloor, capturing bacteria and other food particles. They found polychaete worms, bristle worms, segmented creatures that burrow through the sediment or build tubes on the seafloor. Some are carnivorous, ambush predators that hide in their tubes with only their heads exposed, waiting for prey to drift past. They found holothurians, sea cucumbers, that actually swim, using modified fins, hovering above the seafloor like strange gelatinous blimps. They found things they couldn't identify. Shapes in the darkness, movements on the cameras, disturbances in the sediment that suggested something large had passed by. The Hadal Zone is not fully explored, not even close. We've sent more people to the moon than to the deepest trenches. We've mapped the surface of Mars in better resolution than the floor of the Mariana Trench. There could be anything down there, anything. The first person to reach the bottom of the Mariana Trench was Jacques Piccard, along with Don Walsh, in 1960. They spent 20 minutes on the bottom. The pressure was so intense they were afraid to stay longer, worried that a seal might fail, that a crack might appear in their vessel's hull. For 52 years, no one returned. And then in 2012, filmmaker James Cameron descended alone to Challenger Deep in a specially designed submersible called Deep Sea Challenger. He spent 3 hours on the bottom collecting samples, filming, exploring. He described the experience as desolate and lunar, a barren landscape of gray sediment stretching away in all directions, broken only by the occasional rock or crevice. But he also saw life, amphipods, sea cucumbers, jellyfish, impossible, delicate creatures that had somehow made it to the deepest point on Earth. Their bodies are 99% water, held together by the thinnest membranes, yet they survive pressures that would crush steel. Since 2012, fewer than 10 people have visited the deepest trenches. It's one of the most exclusive clubs on Earth. There are more people who have walked on the moon, more people who have climbed Everest, more people who have been to space. Why so few? Because it's hard, unbelievably hard. The engineering challenges are immense. You need a vessel that can withstand pressures equivalent to having 3 SUVs balanced on your thumbnail. The sphere has to be perfectly round. Any imperfection, any tiny flaw, and the pressure will find it and exploit it. The walls have to be thick, several inches of titanium or specialized steel. The viewing ports have to be small and made of materials that won't crack or deform. And once you're down there, communication is difficult. Radio waves don't travel well through water. Sound does, but sound is slow. It takes seconds for a message to travel from the bottom of the trench to a ship on the surface. You're essentially alone, isolated, surrounded by darkness and pressure and the weight of the entire ocean above you. It's one of the most hostile environments on Earth, and yet life has found a way. You need to understand the timeline of life in the Hadal Zone. When the first organisms appeared on Earth, simple bacteria, maybe 4 billion years ago, the ocean was shallower. The trenches didn't exist yet. Or if they did, they were different, smaller. Plate tectonics has been recycling Earth's crust for billions of years, creating new trenches, destroying old ones. The Mariana Trench itself is probably only 50 million years old, young in geological terms. But deep-sea life is ancient. The adaptations required to survive at depth evolved early. By 3 billion years ago, bacteria were living in deep-sea hydrothermal vents, using chemosynthesis to harvest energy from chemicals. By 1 billion years ago, complex multicellular organisms had colonized the deep ocean. By 500 million years ago, during the Cambrian explosion, the ocean depths were teeming with bizarre arthropods and worms and early fish. As the continents moved and the ocean floor recycled, trenches formed and life invaded them, not all at once. Gradually, species adapted to living at 4,000 meters found they could survive at 5,000 meters. Species at 5,000 meters colonized 6,000 meters. Each step required adaptations, changes in proteins, changes in membranes, accumulation of pressure protective molecules like TMAO. By the time humans appeared, the Hadal Zone had been colonized for tens of millions of years. It had become an ecosystem, isolated, strange, extreme, but functional, and diverse, weary of still discovering new species down there every time we visit. Dozens of them, hundreds perhaps. The question is, what's the limit? How deep can life go? We don't know. The deepest living fish discovered so far was at 8,336 meters, but there's life below that. Amphipods have been found at 10,900 meters, essentially the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Single-celled organisms, bacteria and archaea, are almost certainly present everywhere in the Hadal Zone. They've been found in sediment cores taken from Challenger Deep. But is there a hard limit? A depth below which even bacteria cannot survive? Probably. Eventually, the pressure becomes so great that even the smallest cells can't maintain their integrity. The strongest proteins denature, the toughest membranes rupture. Chemistry breaks down, but we haven't found that limit yet. And every time we look deeper, we find life still thriving, still adapting, still refusing to give up. There's something profound about the Hadal Zone, something almost philosophical. You are standing on a beach now, at sunset, waves lapping at your feet. The ocean stretches out before you, calm and beautiful, reflecting the orange and pink of the sky. It looks peaceful, inviting, safe. But beneath that surface, beneath the waves, lies a world of such extremity it defies comprehension. A world of crushing pressure and absolute darkness and near-freezing temperatures. A world where the simple act of existing requires molecular machinery so specialized, so finely tuned, that it borders on the miraculous. And that world is full of life, not just surviving, thriving. Creatures that have turned one of the most hostile environments on Earth into home, into a place where they hunt and feed and reproduce and evolve. We spend so much time looking outward, searching for life on Mars, listening for signals from distant stars, building telescopes to peer into the depths of space, and we should. The search for extraterrestrial life is one of the great scientific quests of our time. But maybe we should also look down, into the depths of our own ocean, into places we've barely explored, because if life can thrive in the Hadal Zone, in conditions of extreme pressure, extreme cold, extreme darkness, then it can thrive almost anywhere. If amphipods can survive at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, then bacteria could survive in the subsurface oceans of Europa or Enceladus. If snailfish can adapt to pressures 800 times Earth's atmospheric pressure, then something could adapt to the crushing atmosphere of Venus or the frozen wastelands of Titan. The Hadal Zone is proof that life is not fragile. It's resilient, adaptable, relentless. Give it a crack to hide in, a trickle of energy to exploit, and it will find a way. It will evolve. It will persist. We are surrounded by alien worlds. They're not light years away. They're here, right here, just a few kilometers beneath the surface of the ocean that covers 70% of our planet, and we've barely begun to explore them. Consider the pressure, the sheer, crushing weight of the ocean above you when you're at the bottom of a trench. Pressure is force per unit area. At sea level, the atmosphere exerts a pressure of about 14.7 pounds per square inch, or 1 atmosphere. When you dive 10 meters into the ocean, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. So at 10 meters depth, you're experiencing 2 atmospheres. The atmosphere of air above the ocean plus 1 atmosphere of water. At 20 meters, 3 atmospheres. At 100 meters, 11 atmospheres. By the time you reach 1,000 meters, the midnight zone, you're at 101 atmospheres. The weight pressing on every square inch of your body is 1,485 pounds. More than half a ton. Your ribcage would be crushed flat. Your lungs would collapse to the size of golf balls. Air spaces in your sinuses and ears would implode. You would die in seconds. At 6,000 meters, the beginning of the Hadal Zone, the pressure is 600 atmospheres. That's 8,820 pounds per square inch. 4 tons pressing down on every square inch of your body. 11,000 meters, the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the pressure is 1,100 atmospheres. 16,000 pounds per square inch. 8 tons per square inch. If you could somehow survive the pressure long enough to stand on the seafloor, you would feel the weight of the entire Pacific Ocean pressing down on you. And yet creatures live there, not just bacteria or simple organisms. Complex animals, amphipods with nervous systems and muscles and brains. Fish with skeletons and hearts and gills. Sea cucumbers with digestive systems and reproductive organs. How do they do it? The answer is, they're made of water. Your body is about 60% water by weight. A jellyfish is 99% water. Water is incompressible. It can't be crushed or squeezed into a smaller volume, no matter how much pressure you apply. So if your body is mostly water and you don't have any air spaces, then pressure affects you much less than you'd think. The challenge isn't surviving the pressure. The challenge is maintaining your biochemistry under pressure. Keeping your proteins folded correctly, keeping your membranes flexible, keeping your cellular machinery functioning. That's where the specializations come in. The TMAO, the modified membranes, the pressure-adapted enzymes. Evolution has solved the pressure problem. Life has conquered the deepest trenches. The only question now is, where else can it go? You are an explorer, descending in a submersible toward the bottom of the Tonga Trench. You've been falling for 4 hours. The walls of your vessel are 7 inches of titanium, cold to the touch. Through a small round window, barely 8 inches across, you can see nothing. Just blackness. The submersible's lights illuminate a sphere of water maybe 10 meters across, but beyond that, there's nothing. The darkness is total. Your instruments tell you that you're at 10,500 meters. The pressure outside is 1,050 atmospheres. If the sphere you're sitting in had even a tiny flaw, a microscopic crack, a weak weld, the ocean would pour in with such violence it would cut you in half before you had time to scream. But you trust the engineering. You have to. The seafloor appears suddenly in your lights. Gray sediment, smooth and undisturbed except for the tracks left by invisible creatures. You land gently. The submersible skids, settling into the ooze with barely a whisper of sound. And then you wait and watch. At first, nothing. Just the empty seafloor, the slow drift of sediment particles in your light's beams. But then, movement. An amphipod, translucent and ghostly, swimming into view. Then another. Then 10 more. They're curious about this strange object that's invaded their world. They approach cautiously, antennae extended, trying to determine if you're food or threat. You deploy the submersible's arm, extending a piece of bait, a chunk of mackerel, frozen and attached to a stake that you push into the seafloor. Within minutes, hundreds of amphipods are swarming it. Within an hour, thousands. They pile on top of each other, mandibles working, stripping the flesh, reducing the fish to bones. It's frenzied, desperate. This may be the first food some of them have encountered in weeks. A snailfish drifts into view. Pale, gelatinous. Its eyes are tiny, almost vestigial. It hovers near the feeding frenzy, occasionally darting in to snatch an amphipod. It's hunting, using the bait as a lure to attract prey. Clever. You film it, capture this moment of predation at one of the deepest points on Earth. And then, at the edge of your lights, you see something else, something larger, a shape moving slowly across the seafloor. It's too far away to make out details, but it's definitely alive, definitely mobilized. You try to follow it with your lights, but it moves out of range. Gone, vanished into the darkness. What was it? A large fish? A cephalopod? Something unknown? You'll never know. The Hadal Zone keeps its secrets.